Okay, so I think I need to record this to kind of get it out of the way and off my mind. It may go up later. I just haven't decided that yet, but there have been some things that came up that I was thinking about and just kind of really wanting to clarify some things and all, and why I do some of the things that I do and post some of the things that I do post. And really it comes down to the way that I process things and think about things. I know a lot of people don't think or read very well, so that's part of the problem as to why some people would construe some things that I do as in certain ways, in different ways than like I see it, and why it can be weird sometimes, because I know some people have brought up concerns about some things. It's like, but why are they never brought it up? But then later on down the road, it's like, hey, here's why. Like, for example, there have been things that I've posted that people have been like, that's horrible. Why would you post that thing? And it's like, well, let's look at the deeper underlying things. So when I post something, don't just look at it for the face value. Don't look at it for the face value message. What's a message underlying there, an idea underlying there that is true, but people aren't getting in their head? And part of that lies in the idea of victimhood mentality sometimes. So, for example, you might take something way back when, like slavery, for example, and say, hey, I'm a victim of slavery, and so therefore I justify my attitude for being crap, and I just see that as completely wrong. There's no reason to do that when there are countless people that have overcome that and become successful, and they don't use that as a reason for them to have a bad attitude. They don't use that as an excuse for them to get away with doing whatever they want. It's like a child that has a bad attitude. Well, he just has these problems. It's like, well, there's a way around that you can teach them not to have that bad attitude. You don't have to justify that attitude for them. Don't be that kind of a person. And that's kind of one of the things that really bothers me sometimes, is people let others get away with having a bad attitude because, oh, it's in their past, we should just let it go. When it's like, no, don't let it go, but you don't have to be harsh about it because it's in their past. And that's not something that's racist. That's something that's like should be applied across the board. I don't see how you can accuse someone as having a certain position when your only things are like a few things that you point out. It's like, okay, and then do you want to sit down and talk with a person about that thing that you're accusing them of and actually figure it out? Because if you're really a journalist that has real good journalistic intent, or if you have that, say you have that kind of an attitude that you actually look into things, then why haven't you talked to that person? It's like reading Mein Kampf or relying on textbooks from the time period to do it for you. The difference between those two. You're not really going to understand unless you actually talk to or read from the person and what their ideas were and actually flesh those out. And it can be hard, but you can find things where they're talking with other people, and that explains a lot of things. Some people don't have that much recorded where they're actually in a natural conversation, and so some of that stuff doesn't always come out. And so by being able to have those kinds of things, you're actually able to get a more whole perspective on the person. So rather than assuming this because of a few things, when you start assuming someone's character without actually digging into it a little bit more, it makes it difficult for you to have that air of legitimacy because you're still relying on someone else's thing rather than actually jumping in and actually going in and looking. Because there are people, it's like, well, this, that, and the other. I would never want to go there because of these few things that you've shown me. It's like, well, how do you know? I mean, if you don't want to go there because it's not safe for work content and you don't like not safe for work content, that's one thing. But if you're accusing someone of having a certain character, then why would you not jump in? And I can understand jumping back out if you're like blasted with not safe for work content. But then at the same time, do you make the effort to actually talk to them? Or are you just standing off on the sidelines and watching? Or are you actually going out and looking for other things where maybe they've talked to other people and other programs and whatnot to figure out who they really are? Do you actually put the legwork in, or are you just using the legwork of other people and what they're watering down and telling you? This is kind of what textbooks do, is they water down the content rather than you relying on the people that actually lived through that period. You can understand how people think from different periods just by reading journals and things like that. But if we rely on someone else's watered down version of it and we don't actually do that legwork, then how do we know? And I know some people don't agree with me on a lot of things, and some of those people I get along with. And it's because there are certain things I don't bring up around certain people because it's like, well, I don't see that as appropriate to the group. Whereas other places, it's like, hey, here you go. And some of those things kind of run off of assumptions, and then we start doing crazy things because of it. And there have been a lot of horrible things that have happened in the past because of those things, and I try to avoid that and understand what the background really is. And when I'm reading something like Mein Kampf, it's because I want to understand really what's going on rather than through someone else's head how they think that they were doing things. Why not hear from the person directly in their own writing what they thought rather than relying on someone else to water it down for me? And I mean, and it also helps you understand and learn from history and recognize those signs to look out for in other people. Because just because you read something like Mein Kampf doesn't mean you're invested in the idea. And there may be points that you agree with in it, and there are others that you don't agree with. You can find lots of lessons that you can learn from for your own ideas as well. But don't think of it as just because there's one or two ideas that you can pick, someone says they can pick from it, that they're all invested in, that they're too far in the rabbit hole. It's those kinds of things. It's like, not just because I read Karl Marx doesn't mean I'm a Marxist. Just because I read Hitler doesn't mean I'm a Nazi. It's like, I want to learn from these to understand like those origins and why people are acting the way that they are. And in some cases, you can learn the signs of the crazy person in order to avoid those, or see how someone's worldview was shaped and recognize that in other people and be able to point that out. And I think that's the problem that we've lost, is we've literally got literature inside the minds of these people that those people wrote themselves, and yet we want to push that off rather than learn what we can from it and avoid those same things. But instead, we ignore that and go down the same path in many ways that they did. And then we can learn from other things how they were very much the same. So, like, take for example Hitler. I'm in the middle of a video that's basically explaining what kind of the difference between, and well, that explains National Socialism and really how it is a socialist structure in reality. And when most people say that, talk about socialism, they're referring to the Marxist variety of socialism, so like the class difference. But really, when you look at the arguments that people make, and this is from what my conclusions, what I've seen in the video so far, so the person purports Nazism as a racist socialism, whereas Marxist socialism is a classist socialism. And then there are other varieties within the socialist paradigm as well, since this came around before Marx even wrote the Communist Manifesto. But it's in that where it's like, when you look at the way people argue about, like, well, we should do this, that, and the other, and then you see how some people segregate, like, this collective property is for the blacks or whatever, indigenous peoples. It's like, wait, you are a racist socialist ideology. And then you look at, like, the idea of fascism, which basically relies wholly upon nationality. So if you want to be incorporated into a nationality, then you're in that socialist model. So you've got a national socialism, whereas Hitler's national socialism was a race-based socialism. It's just really confuses me how people can say that. But then back onto the subject, you wouldn't really understand that and that difference, because if you only got a watered down version through someone else, and they painted that worldview as something else than what it actually was, if you actually read these original works. So, in that way, painting someone's character as something that it's not, or accusing someone of being something that they're not, some sort of racist or whatever, purely based on a few things that they post or they talk about or they read, just seems like a whole mischaracterization of that character. And people have started to put certain principal ideas, like being on time to work, as a white supremacist idea. It's like, wait, for a while there, this was just like a societal virtue in essence, is like being prompt on time, having a good work ethic, and things like that were just like principles that you needed in order to keep society functioning and peaceful. But now it's like labeled as this white supremacy thing, because I think in many ways people don't like it. And I think part of this whole like accusing everything of being racist or whatever comes down to someone's guilty conscience of their own racism, and they don't want to admit it. It's like the religious person or porn addict that like feels guilty about their dirty thoughts, and they want to control the environment around them rather than figure out their own mind. They would rather change their outside world to try and eliminate all the temptations that they have for those thoughts, rather than fix the innate problem themselves and change their mentality, which is harder. But in reality, the hardest part is actually changing other people. In order to be able to change that outer world, you literally have to take an authority stance and put your boot on someone else's neck in order to get them to really conform. And again, back to the common cliche saying is, a man convinced against his will is of the same opinion still. So you never really changed anything, you just made people resent you. Whereas you could have done the work yourself inside your own head to change the way you think so that you don't think those things. So when you look at someone or something, you don't think those things. And I think that's really what this stems from, is their guilty conscience of their own racist tendencies, and they don't like that other people don't have that same guilt that they do. And that's the hard part, is like, when you can look at other people and all you can think of is that guilt, it's kind of sad. Whereas other people can go around, interact with other people. Yeah, it can be kind of weird to work with someone that's different than you. But at the same time, the people that succeed in life end up like, okay, yeah, he's different than me, but what can I find deeper that I can appreciate about him? Or what is it about this person that I can learn from that, and how that I can make friends with them? What can I learn? Can I make a new friend in the process? Doesn't matter how different they look from me, how different they are. If they're going to be nice, to me, why not be nice to them? It doesn't make sense that purely based on some immutable characteristic that I have to exorcise them from my company. Why should I exclude someone from my friendship based on some other characteristic? Why should I want to kill someone based on some other characteristic that they didn't really choose? Whereas I could pick my friends based on how they treat me instead of their skin color, instead of their eye color, instead of their hair color. Why do I have to base my friend circles off of that when I can just include other people in it? And if we all want to have fun, however we do that, then what does it really matter to some other people? And again, I think really it comes down to some people feel guilty, or they've been imbued with this original sin of race, what their alleged original sin of being racist, that they have to try and eliminate that from the outside space and control other people and tell them what to do, or knock other people down and make them force them into being more socially acceptable in their eyes. So, next time someone accuses someone else of being a racist, maybe you could talk to that person making that accusation, or you can talk to the person that they're accusing and actually get the background on it. I really can't say, but I just try my best, and that's really all I can expect from anyone else. So if you want to do that little bit of more research and you've been browsing around the internet and want to know me a little bit better, I do have Discord Guilded and a couple other places that I have linked down in the description. So you can use that and look at that, and I'll see you all in the next one.